Evening. I'd like to welcome everyone to the City Council work session and special meeting of Tuesday, February 18th. Call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Okay, great. So first item on the agenda is public comment. If you would like to make public comment, remember, raise your hand, state your name and mailing address. Try to keep it under 3 minutes. Be kind and respectful to each other and to the council members. We're all trying to do our best. So is there anyone that would like to make public comment at this time? Todd?
Hello, Todd Lawson, I think that's at Nahalem Tribe. My address is Seattle, but I'll just say Nakoos is my address for today. Message sent from the tribe. We really want to thank everyone for still participating and letting us be involved in the project. It means a lot to the tribe. And that I think it's important to state that we don't feel that the vote was against the tribe, but against sort of the budget and kind of why we're back at the drawing board. So we're here, still here. There's some people online I see, and looking forward to participate further. And it's always interesting to comment before, but just a few insights I thought from the package I read and the numbers that we're going to discuss was there's some big items that are contributing to the budget that are going to happen no matter what happens on the site. So the $6 million that was presented and then the total of $9 million, I would say $1.5 million maybe is just site stuff that needs to happen no matter what happens there. The food bank or the sidewalk needs to be ADA upgraded and better, and some landscaping. So I think that can kind of be looked at in perspective as part of a bigger thing, not just the project. And then also, I've had a lot of people ask me about, well, why don't they just tear it all down and do a project like the NCLC, beautiful little building? And it's just not an apples to apples comparison where great project, by the way, but the gymnasium it's really unique. It's special. It's going to house 280 people or something like that would be the occupancy load. So I think that's really important for the community. And it's not really, the tribe would love to use it, but I think it's a community thing that hopefully we can figure out how to make that happen. So I'm here to answer any questions on archaeology or anything. And I just had a meeting with Doug and he prepped me a little bit for some questions if need be. So thanks again for your time, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd.
Tim?
I'm Timothy Ramey, P.O. Box 429, Cannon Beach. I was a supporter of the project in its original form, although I'm certainly not wed to any particular form or any particular approach. I was part of the group that supported, and I think we didn't do a very good job of telling the story and letting people understand, kind of the realities of the situation. One of the things that I hope the council keeps their eye on is that this project had a public buy-in problem, but it didn't have a funding problem. We all know the funding sources, TLT, and I think I wrote one time saying, I think this project is maybe big enough to sop up that extra $2 million a year that must be spent on TLT. So this is not about trying to find a smaller project, at least in my mind, if we're true to the principles of what we have to use TLT for. So I hope for great things. I hope you guys find a great way forward. and a way to get this done. I'm not bullish on the idea that what you come up with eventually will be cheaper. I think it's probably going to be more expensive. It's just the passage of time. So we're not going to save money, in my opinion, but maybe we get something that we can get more public buy-in. That's ultimately necessary. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Eddie?
Betty Gearing, PO Box 137, Cannon Beach. Thank you for all the work you've done so far on getting this project over the finish line. Some of the community voted in November to stop the school project under false impressions that the costs were not covered and their property taxes would be raised to cover the costs, and that there was no plan for specific designated uses for each building. There was a plan put in place to honor Nakoos ancestors and educate visitors and residents alike about their specific environment. The facility was to be a place both community and visitors could enjoy. In summer, it could host your yearly summer art camp, the Haystack Rock program, and classes highlighting the cultural significance of the site. In winter, it would provide a space for our community and visitors to gather for concerts, movies, recreation, and environmental talks and educational talks, many uses. I was part of the Nakoos Advisory Committee, which spent hours creating a budget plan, a calendar of possible uses, and educational content for tribal, ecological, and geological classes that were planned. The project would not raise our property taxes. It would be funded by TLT taxes and grants. Please consider these facts as we move forward. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Betty.
Maribel?
That's all, PO Box 492, not giving you my work one. I am here to talk about Nakoos as well. I was very sad that the funding or that the approval did not come through in the ballot. I believe that the buildings that are there they hold deep history for our community and they should be preserved. I'm not in favor of tearing them down and building anew. And I think there's a lot of people in this community that feel like their sweat and muscle power built those buildings, and they feel a deep connection there as well. If we go back before that time to when the tribe was there, this village welcomed the visitors. It was not a hostile place of exclusion. And I hope that this will be seen as a place that we share with the people who come here, and not a place where we selfishly exclude people from coming. So I encourage you to keep that in mind, but I also encourage you to keep in mind the third part of this, and that is how the place is funded. If when there is discussion about plans, because I know that there are several plans out in the community that people would like to see approved and brought forward. If the funding sources could be first and foremost in your minds as you are having the discussions, that would be awesome. And to make that absolutely transparent in your discussions at every meeting, because there was a lot of misconception out there. People thought that their property taxes were going to go up. If we make this a selfish, hours only, community only center, our taxes will go up because the funding source will be Cannon Beach money. If we have a mentality of abundance, of reciprocity, and we allow TLT money to be used so that we can open up this jewel that we have here and share it with our visitors, then we don't have to have people upset that their property taxes are going up. And the ones who are upset are the ones who can't really afford to have their property tax go up. So I hope that you will keep all of that in mind. I know that was a little rambling, but I think there are important points to keep in mind as we go forward with this discussion of what's going to happen at Nakoos. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Marvin.
Anyone else in the audience? Okay, if you're on Zoom and would like to speak, please raise your hand. Remember name and mailing address. Anyone online?
Yeah, Randy has his hand up.
Okay, Randy?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Randy Neal, PO Box 1092. I came to give input on both topics tonight, CBE and short-term rental. Comparing the staff provided background, data, analysis, or recommendations. It's sort of interesting how comparing the two. For CBE, the staff and the consultants provided another 20 pages of you don't understand the cost and not much else. It does list a bunch of key steps, decide whether there's support for facility, determine whether the costs are acceptable, identify how the improvements will be funded, define what process should be used. But there's really no other analysis, recommendations, whatever that go into that part. Everything was about you don't understand the project cost. As for short-term rental topic, the staff report provides nothing, nada, no background information, no data of any kind, no problem statement, no next steps or recommendations. I'd like to provide a couple of random inputs instead. There could be two problem statements. One is, are short-term rentals having a negative impact on our housing availability? The second one is, are short-term rentals having a negative impact on livability in our neighborhoods? Since the town's changed to 14-day rental permits years ago, I've seen no correlation between short-term rentals and the housing market. Short-term rentals have remained flat for 10 years straight. This happened during strong and weak housing markets. This happened during periods of both high and low interest rates. Census housing units grew 350 units in a decade. Short-term rentals stayed flat. Second homes grew by 300 units. Short-term rentals stayed flat. The community development department says there's requests, but few permits. There are 20 or 25 new permits each year, 1 or 2 a month, but half are not renewed for their second year. 14-day permit occupancy rules limit revenues so much that pay even taxes, insurance, or repairs, let alone mortgages. 14-day permits are the best things that we have going in our town for short-term rental. As for livability, there's many topics, but a cap really is one. Proximity, density, and or exclusion zones could be very useful. Seaside has these ordinances. Proximity rules would drive out 40 or 50 short-term rentals space a day. The lifetime permits generate 2x the occupancy as 14-day short-term rentals. The remaining 45 units are the equivalent of 90 14-day units. It may take 30 years for them to fade off the books as they only only 1 or 2 drop off every year. 4 of the 8 management companies operate 50 of the 200 short-term rentals, but the remaining 50 each pretty much has their own personal rep. Do these require city business licenses? Do we think they do a better or worse job? Other questions that are out there of, do we have illegal short-term rentals? Who knows? Nobody is trying to measure. There's many things that could be done. A cap is the least useful of any of them. A team of stakeholders paired with a complete set of data could be a powerful step towards solving the livability issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? Anyone else in the audience? Okay, thanks very much. So we'll move into our discussion items, and this one is the Cannon Beach Elementary School rejuvenation costs. Bruce?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to read an executive summary first, just so we get right to the main point. A referral for the funding of the Cannon Beach Elementary School project failed on the November 5th, 2024 ballot. In the aftermath, there have been discussions regarding moving forward with a different, less expensive option. The potential costs that some have suggested seem to be in the $6 to $8 million range. For classrooms and gym building to become usable for any purpose, we must bring both structures up to code. Unfortunately, the cost to meet the minimal code requirement is estimated to be $8.8 to $9.2 million. The completion of the items listed on the conceptual baseline report or budget are the starting point for making value-added investments like a real gym floor, pickleball courts, sound system, projectors, furnishings, etc. The details of the items required to be brought up to code are included in the memo attached to this staff report. As background, recently the city held a referral questioning moving forward with the Cannon Beach Elementary School renovation project at an anticipated budget and configuration. The referral failed, which meant the project would not move forward as envisioned at that time. However, there has been little or no community discussion regarding what alternative configuration might be considered and what budget level would be acceptable for a new design. Magnitude of the cost of the code-related renovations is higher than what might be expected. Reason is that we are changing the building classification from school to assembly, which requires a higher number of structural and other code upgrades than if the structure's classification was not changed. We cannot operate a tourism or community facility while maintaining the school classification. As a starting point for determining the appropriate funding level for the reimagined project, the staff, our architects, CETA, and the construction managers, Bremen Construction, went through an exercise to determine how much of an investment is required just to bring each 60-year-old building up to code. We're calling this the conceptual baseline estimate. This report does not include improvements that would enhance the scope of the program changes. CETA put together a basic scope narrative to assist Bremick with their pricing efforts. The items listed are to bring the buildings and site into conformance with ADA requirements as needed and as needed to meet structural, building, accessibility and energy codes. There are some small scopes peppered in for getting structures up to an operational level, such as a fresh coat of paint throughout and new flooring in the classrooms that don't lend directly to code compliance, but will be needed for any level of occupancy. Any enhancement that might make the buildings more usable as a community space were not included, and ultimately their cost is in addition to the conceptual baseline estimate. Not included are items like a finished gym floor, removal of the gym mezzanine, which does not meet code, gym equipment, acoustic panels to enhance musical and speaking events in the gym, building furnishings, ancillary buildings, new lobby, park plantings, and irrigation systems, Southeast Plaza work or North Courtyard improvements, statuary, new exterior canopies / covered walkways, kitchen space and or equipment, AV or sound equipment, and improvements that recognize or honor the Clatsop Nehalem tribe. The costs to do the conceptual baseline estimate code work related are split into two categories. Baseline hard costs, that's what you would see in the construction, at 6.4 million. And baseline soft costs is 2.4 million to 2.8 million. Construction costs is the total, is the baseline budget is 8.8 to 9.2 million. Tonight we're here to talk about what are the next steps. What I'm going to read is more of a laundry list of items that need to be addressed than an order of tasks to be undertaken. 1, decide if there is support or an opportunity to make improvements to the facility. 2, determine what improvements above the baseline estimate are desirable and whether the costs are acceptable. 3, define what process will be used to seek and refine the recommendations. 4, identify how the improvements will be funded. Some options: general obligation bonds or transient lodging tax. The use of the transient lodging tax implies a certain focus on tourism-related activities. The recommendation: the council decides, or at least starts the process to decide, if there is a desire in the community to renovate the Cannon Beach Elementary facilities. If the renovations move forward, are they going to be oriented towards tourism with ancillary use of a small city's community center? Or will the emphasis be on a community center oriented towards activities of interest to residents? The council should determine how improvements for the facilities will be funded. Thank you for hearing me out. Wanted to try to set up a next step.
Thank you. So does Sita and Remick have a presentation for us to go over the numbers?
We can go over the numbers in detail. We're mainly here to answer any questions you all.
So I have a question. The numbers that are being presented here, the conceptual baseline estimate of the 8.8 to 9.2 million, does this include any of the costs that have currently been incurred to date? The roof, the replacement of the roof on the classroom building, the asbestos abatement, and any of the soft costs that have already been incurred, all the designs and stuff. So this is additional on top of the 2 million that's already been spent.
Yes.
Okay.
What we did is we did the original work to essentially tighten up the buildings and kind of hold them in a decent condition. And then after that was when we started doing the planning for the facilities, what we would use the facilities for, that sort of thing. So that you're correct, that cost is
Okay.
these numbers.
So we honestly don't have an apples to apples comparison, this number to what we were presented at the 12.4 million dollar number, correct? Is that 12.4 million included those costs?
No,
12.4 did not include those costs.
I
did it include the 2 million? I didn't think it did.
Okay, so with this refinement of numbers, there's no way that we were going to hit $12 million in the first place. With the amount that's been removed, it's not including the 2 million. So you'd say this estimate would be 11 million then. There was no way this project was going to be 12 million in the first place.
Now, when you include the preliminary costs.
Okay. And I think that was the concern of people that I talked to. The 12 million was an unacceptable number in the community. And nobody believed the $12 million number. And I feel like this shows us that the $12 million number wasn't accurate. That we were likely going to exceed that significantly based on $9 million to get to minimum code, but yet you've removed so much from this project. It doesn't include the gym floors, the mezzanine, the landscaping work on the regular landscaping work, the courtyard work, the lobby in between the buildings, any of the finishing work. New kitchen is not included. Plumbing for an additional bathroom isn't included. There's no IT room, and the possible removal and replacement of the PP&L poles isn't included in the 9.2 million. So that these numbers, they just don't make sense to me.
The 9.2 is not supposed to be the cost of a project. There's the minimal to get to code.
So we would have had to do all of this
Yes,
for the $12 million project.
yes.
So $3 million is what the cost that we're getting out of this entire thing would have been. The amount that's been cut out of this is a $3 million cut.
That seems like the number that I recall.
Yeah,
Essentially we were, it was going to cost us close to $10 million just to get it, so that it could be occupied. And that really everything that came in being something desirable and useful was the remaining $3 million. I don't know how close that is or how much you've already adjusted this for cost gains and inflation to this point, but those are roughly the numbers that I recall. But I don't know.
Gary,
Can you clarify?
that's not too far off. The 3 million is not too far off. I would say that it was a little higher than that when you factor in, I think at one point we had it down to around $2 million for all of the site work that we were showing, everything that we were doing out in the north courtyard, canopies, minus that did not include the addition in between the two. Okay, and the lobby, basically. That I believe was around another 1.6 million. I think where you start to see a little bit of a discrepancy is that 0.5 or 0.6 million. And something that you'll find in these very conceptual numbers is because we're not pricing, we don't have a fully developed set of plans and specifications that we're handing off to Bremick to price. So they're having to carry higher contingencies. On the soft cost side, we're carrying contingencies, whereas before we knew what our services were. There was zero contingency. We're carrying 10%. We're having the city hold a 10% contingency, and that's both 10% of hard costs and soft costs. Mr. Ostrander, to your question about what does this $9 million include? I can speak better to the soft costs than I can to the hard costs. There are some efficiencies that you gain in the soft costs. You're not going to have to get site surveys done again. You're not going to have to go through State Historic Preservation Office again to the same level or to do archaeology testing. So there are some gains there. It's not that none of what was spent goes back into this number, but the majority of those soft costs are looking at this project anew. So we would be saying, okay, terminate the current contract for architecture and engineering services and start fresh. There's some project we don't have developed yet, but this is about what we're thinking.
Okay, yeah, and I noticed the soft costs were essentially identical from the June 2024 estimate to this estimate. It was the hard costs that were changed. I just had some significant concerns that because we don't have an apples to apples comparison of in the what was presented to us in this packet, the Bremick, it's like page 10 or so on our packet. The breakdown, there is no breakdown like that for the previous project to see what was removed and what's an inflationary change and what's what's different between that project and the project and these baseline costs? Because these baseline costs existed for the other project conceivably, right?
So the baseline costs and the construction hard costs were in the previous project. What the exercise we were asked to participate in was taking the previous design project and moving that back to an occupiable, seismically ready building. And so what the costs that you're describing in the Bremick proposal are, is it's a budget based on the written narrative that we've taken many steps backward at this point from what was essentially a permit set of documents to a written narrative. And so what's in the summary in the budget for the construction hard costs is reflective of the written narrative that's there so far.
Okay. So
I'm sorry.
go ahead. No, what was the question?
I was just trying to go back on what happened with the original expenditure. My recollection is that we purchased the facility from the school board. And then we used general fund money to do some things that were required in order to stabilize the structures. And we did that.
Mhm.
And from that point on, we were going and looking at money that would have to be borrowed to do the project. So we didn't include those dollars. Probably appropriate to do it, depending on how you wanted to quantify the cost of the project. It can be in there, or you could be looking forward what you're going to be spending. But I think that's what happened with the 2 million in the beginning. It was general fund dollars.
Okay.
Can I jump in, Eric, just on your point?
Yeah.
For a moment. You were talking about Bremick documents on page 10. And so I just wanted to be clear about that.
Starting page 10, yeah.
It's starting on page 10. It's dated 6/3/2024. So just for my information. And then the whole proposal was updated, but did you just take out the cost that we were removing, the unnecessary costs? We call them unnecessary, but anything we could take out that doesn't just make the place occupiable? Or were any of these numbers adjusted for inflation?
I think I can answer that one for you. So I do see where that could be confusing, having two different dates next to each other. The 50% CD 6/3/24 were reflective. That was the last formal pricing that was done. It went through some pauses. These were updated in January 6th of 25. So the intent being to.
So the numbers that do have numbers applied to them in the itemized listing were updated.
Updated to reflect our evolving understanding of the project scope. Yes,
In January,
in January. So keep.
beginning of January.
Every month that passes, costs change though too. We've had that conversation a few times.
Okay, so this had 3 months of inflation put into this?
No, this is reflective of January 6th, 2025.
Okay, so it's 3 months of inflation. The June numbers said they had an additional 4 months of inflation built into them already. So they had inflation built in until October, according to the June document. So you have just those 3 more months of inflation built in.
There's no additional inflation built into what's shown at the 1/6. So that was resetting at that point, right? So costs updated through January 6th are reflective of what's in the column. On that January 6th, there's not inflation because we don't really understand it's going. So we didn't know how to guess anymore what that.
Yeah. Okay. So
Benchmarked it.
it was inflation up until that point.
And it's reset on January 6th, and there's not currently inflation estimated there because we don't understand what the project started.
Okay.
So the general fund dollars that were spent, and I could be wrong on this, but weren't they repaid? Were taken out? I believe that intercompany transfer was made, so it has been paid out of the bond proceeds. Wasn't paid out of general funds, but moreover, city council indicated that her interpretation of the ballot measure was that the solution needed to be significantly different and less costly. that's our city council's interpretation of this project. So, does the work that you've done here significantly change the project? It really doesn't, does it? It just takes us back to a baseline of what we already had. And that's to no fault of yours. I mean, you did exactly what you were asked to do. And, you know, we've got a $9 million baseline. We'll just use that number. And then we've already spent 2 million. So that's 11 million. So if we need to add 3 more million just to make the project, then you're up to 14 million. Right? So that's not significantly different or less cost. How do we get there? That's the big question. How do we get there, and be able to still make this a gathering place?
We get where?
To a significantly different plan and less costly, because that was Ashley's, the city council's, our city councilor's interpretation of the ballot measure.
Our,
Ashley, yeah,
yeah,
Attorney.
our city attorney,
Yeah.
sorry, yes.
that's pretty close to what I believe. I believe it was concerned about costs. You know, parking and community events was part of it. And so, I guess my fear about losing the election was exactly what has happened here. That, you know, we look at the costs and I think they're like $766 a square foot to retain both buildings, just to bring it up to this minimum standard. And so now we're faced with getting less for more. And so now just to make those buildings occupiable, we're at this 9.2 range. I don't think the cost per square.
But you've
foot
already
is-
spent $2 million on it. So that's 11.2. Because we've already spent $2 million, right? 1.5.
I don't believe it's that much,
I
but
think it's,
I don't recall how much it was, but it was in that neighborhood.
yeah, so that takes you up to 11, just say around 11 million. Because we still need to take into consideration that $2 million that's already been spent.
we do for a total budget, yes.
And that 9.2 doesn't include that 2
So
million.
I guess that's, to my point, it's like, okay, so what is the path forward, you know? It's not a great picture for a path forward if the answer is it's gotta cost less. So I think I've said it for months. That it's like, okay, we can either just patch the buildings up, which, I mean, this 9.9 to me is a lipstick on a pig job. It's, 2 buildings that are occupiable, but they don't really have the use that we had intended. Or some of the amenities like the park improvements. And so that kind of leaves us with, okay, well, do we not save one of the buildings? And was that anywhere in your calculations here? Like, okay, how much would it cost to give up on the classroom, but save the gymnasium? How much would it cost to give up on the gymnasium, but save the classroom?
Yeah, I don't think that's an angle that we've been asked to look at yet, was one.
I mean,
That's it.
again,
Solutions. I'm glad you're putting ideas out on the table.
I don't know how you get to this cost savings and we satisfy the people who just say it costs too much. With that, I mean,
Well, 60% of the voters in Cannon Beach voted no. And so that's a significant amount of people.
But what do they want?
But what do they want?
well,
They want something that
I
is
think that's the
significantly
question we need to ask.
different and
That's,
less.
that's where we're at now. Of we have a dollar figure finally of what this takes to do the bare minimum to do it.
Yeah.
We need to ask the community, is that something that you want to spend money on? Do you want to spend $9 million? 11 million spent to start the process of recovering the two buildings, but a total of $11 million just to recover the buildings and then additional funds. Whether it's coming from visitors' pockets or our own pockets, this is still money that's coming through the city. And we have a responsibility to spend it wisely and the way that the community wants us to spend it. They didn't vote, 60% voted no and did not want the $12 million plan that was proposed. So do they want us to do that, or do they want us to do, like Gary said, prioritize one building over the other, demo both buildings and rebuild a longhouse in one of them, demo both buildings, put a park in to the whole thing? What do they want out of this? And I think that's the question that needs to be asked. And that's the question that should have been asked in the first place, once we knew budget numbers of what this was. Because everyone can say, I want this, I want that, I want this. And it's very exciting when you get beautiful plans put before you, but then as soon as the hard numbers are there, that's when the real questions, the real cuts need to be.
Real question is how you're going to fund it. You can't separate what you want from how you're going to fund it. One is through TLT dollars, which requires a certain kind of usage. One is through general fund money, which requires a different kind of usage. But I don't think the question can be separated from where you're going to fund it, how you're going to fund it. I think they are inseparable.
I don't feel like I was suggesting that be a separate conversation. This needs to be part of the same conversation.
Right.
But it's a conversation that needs to be had with the community.
Again,
there was never a discussion with the community about the budget, and that's what put us in the position that we're at now.
yeah. I beg to differ with that, because we had a lot of community meetings where the budget was presented and people could speak. And, it's sort of like, to tell you the truth, I expected, 50 people here tonight, because this is an issue that we're told we wanted to have more input. We wanted to speak out. We wanted to give our impressions of what we want. Well, how many people spoke tonight? 5, and most of them were in favor of the old project. So I'm told, before I was confused about what people wanted, now I'm lost.
Well, I think some of it's clear. 40% of the people wanted the project as it was designed. 60% of the people wanted 10 different things, and I think
they did not want the project as designed. It's a yes or no. 40% wanted it, 60%
but
not wanted as designed.
some of them wanted the place bulldozed and didn't want anything. Some of them wanted this. It cost too much because they were told that it cost too much. And it was not in proportion to other building projects. And now we look at this and we see, oh, this really was in proportion to other building projects. So I think there were many reasons that, people were against it, because it was sold as an event center and a tourist focused thing, drawing people to the community. So, but it was set up on the ballot essentially as do you want to spend this much money on this project? So yes, in a sense, that's what it was. But, in engaging with people and finding out, really where people are at with it, it was 10 different reasons. So, but we are where we are. We can start over, but I think I hope we're realistic at this point. Either that it would cost us $12+ million, maybe more like 14 now, to save those two buildings and give us something that would really be usable, or we can start backing off that and not save one of the buildings, bulldoze it and build something small like Land Conservancy. But, you know, if it's all about the cost, there's no way to get there without doing the things that you suggested. Picking a building and losing the other one, or bulldozing the whole thing and building something smaller. And so then it comes down to what people want. I mean, personally, I don't want to give up on that vision of an interpretive center, something that honors that Native American site, that honors the village that was there. And I love the concept of an environmental learning center. I think I've shared with a lot of people the Dungeness River Nature Center in Sequim, Washington, that is such an amazing place that it not only tells the story of the native people there, but it's educating young people and old people about the environment. It's making environmental stewards out of people. And I see that as such a valuable thing for this community. So I don't want to give up on that.
So if we were to follow that plan, which building would you get rid of? Which of those, the classrooms or the gym, be better suited?
You know, one of the other problems is just where the buildings are sitting. You know, they're practically on Beaver Street. So if we solve people's questions about parking, we're turning the park into a parking lot. So that's a good question. I mean, we could probably save the classroom building and build some kind of entrance and have it be less expensive than we were looking at. I have no idea if the gymnasium could be turned into that and divided up into something. You know, if we lose the classrooms but save the gymnasium, essentially talking about an event center, and then we got all the parking, but nobody wants an event center. So it's thoughts.
You know, we'd love the opportunity to go back and take a look at each of these buildings independently and present to you what it might look like from a project standpoint and a programmatic standpoint of keeping one versus the other. And there's different benefits to each of those, right? Where else do you have a space like that gymnasium building in Cannon Beach? However, it is closer to Beaver Street and it was never designed to be a permanent building. So those are things to consider. It's been developed to be a permanent building and it can continue to be that, but just a consideration. But if that's the next step that the council would like us to take, is to look at that option and develop it and bring back some numbers, you know, associated with that, we'd jump at the opportunity.
Later in the packet, it does talk about the demolition costs, which I believe was about $500,000, maybe a little more than that in the top end. And then new construction costs, which I realize are just a stab in the dark, but comparable square footage. So we could bulldoze the two buildings and we could have new construction, you know, a 5,000 square foot facility that would give us 3 flexible 1,000 square foot classroom exhibit spaces and another 2,000 feet for entry, lobby, restrooms. I don't even know if that's reasonable, but then that puts us in about the $5 million construction range. And that's, you know, that's also not including any landscape park things. So I don't know. I don't know how to move this forward.
I'm curious to hear if there could be estimates of what it would take to make one of the other buildings. You know, I mean, if people want, NRDC has been, you know, their building has been brought forward so many times. That's not going to happen in one of these two buildings. That's just too that the only way that building would happen is if what we have is demolished and a new building was put up. So, you know, I don't know. Do people want that? Do they want the buildings taken down and an NRDC kind of building put up? Or do they really, you know, want to see one of the buildings preserved and made into something that's usable, but they're both such different buildings, it's hard to understand what the end result would be.
You
And
know, we hear from Todd, everybody's all over the place on this thing, you know,
yeah,
the gymnasium is a very interesting building.
it's interesting, all right.
I mean, ugly now, but an interesting construction, a kind of a historical construction. I was never that attached to any of them, either of them myself, but
Yeah.
I didn't teach there or attend the school or, but I think we need to look at all those options. We need to look at, you know, what could possibly be done with the gymnasium if that's the building. We look at saving. What could be done with the classrooms if that's what we're looking at saving, and what could be done with new construction. But it's just like, okay, are we gonna go at this? The way we went about this project in the beginning was, here's what we'd like to do. You know, what's it gonna cost us to get there? And you know, we wanted to be this flexible space, and we wanted to save the gymnasium for community recreational purposes, and we had all the uses. And then we looked at the budget that it would take to get there, and it was 12.4, something like that. Now are we just saying, well, let's pick a budget and see what we can do for it?
And what is that budget?
And what is the project?
Or what's the budget?
I'm sure,
What's an acceptable budget? And what can we get for that budget?
well, I've asked that question before. If 12.4 was too much, how much is acceptable?
Right. I don't know.
And demolishing the gym, besides it being a beautiful building and, you know, a great place to have community events and,
Jennifer Rusita has her hand up.
okay,
Done the comments.
I'll forget what I was saying.
Sorry.
You know, we wanted to have community events there. We wanted to have some events in the winter. But also we heard a lot about people wanting the gym for recreational purposes. It's not going to happen if it's demolished.
No.
It's not.
And that's gonna lose us some support for this too. So
Right. And if it's
anything we do
Right.
is gonna
the
lose.
NRDC
some-
building, like a building like that also won't have a gym.
Jennifer,
It's not gonna
hi,
play pickleball in it.
you got the answer for us all?
Well, no, I don't think there is an easy answer, but I do think that, you know, I think when we've explored this, we understand that to preserve these buildings is a lot of money, and to do additional items to make it more useful is addition to that. So I do think you guys were starting to hit one, and I lowered my hand for a second because you were hitting on exactly what I was thinking, is that if there's a target number that we have to hit and say, this is what the project can cost to pass to meet the requirement that the city attorney is recommending, then I think that we need to be armed with something that we can then go use. So if this is the target amount that the city is willing to put into this, invest into this, and it has to meet the, you know, the revenue source that's coming into it, then we say, this is what you can afford. This is what you can afford a new building. This is what you can afford to keep one of the buildings. And the other thing I wanted to bring up is that of all the outreach we did do, there was lots of people talking about the tribe and the heritage of the tribe. There's a lot of people also talking about the memory of the buildings and what they meant to them. So it is a very complex problem that you're currently trying to address. But I do think we've tested the theory, and the reality is there's not a lot of money to pull out of the project to get it to substantially lower. So you're going to have to catastrophically do something different, whether that's one building, the other, tear them both down, put a park in, whatever. But I think for us to be able to come back and give you valuable input on what you can do, I think we need to know where we're trying to go from a target standpoint.
What the
Yeah.
number would be.
So far, all we've heard is it costs too much, but what we haven't heard is, okay, well, how much is the right amount?
Exactly. Yep. Is it, is it a half? Is it 2/3? Is it 3/4? Is it? I don't know the answer from the information we have from the vote.
Todd, did you want to say something? You got to come up.
Todd Lawson. That's the Ham Tribe. Was it too expensive because it was gonna be a tourist thing, or was it too expensive because the property taxes weren't gonna get raised, but there was the thought about it? Because it seemed like I heard a lot of people say, oh, if it would have been for the community, then $12 million is fine. But if we're spending $12 million to house these tourist events, then I was against that. And so it's sort of a branding or messaging idea. So that would be a question for the councils. Do you see that as being spending money in a way that's more clear to be community access? Because I thought there was a big movement of some people saying, well, I don't want tourists. I don't want to spend my money on the tourist dollar. But if the community, I'd spend the money on it. So I think that's an interesting tribe stuff aside. As a community building, I think people felt it wasn't for them. But I think there could be some clarification on that and get it back to a community building as opposed to a church building.
So I heard, thank you, Todd. A lot of what I heard throughout the process, all of us did get up and speak through the process, but initially, and I know that I'm probably going to get a little poo-pooed on this, and because the TLT dollars did buy the property, although it sounds like initially it was purchased with general funds. When the initial conversations were had, it was being sold as a community center for around $4 million. Now, I'm not saying, but that is what I got from a lot of people in the community. And they were confused and concerned as to why it had morphed into this 12 point something million project. I think a lot of people bought in on at the beginning. This is great. The school will be fixed up. It won't be an eyesore at the beginning of town. We're going to have a community center. And, $4 million, and everybody knows there's a give or take in construction. The normal people in the community don't understand TLT dollars. We can't ask them to understand. It's a hard education process. It's just not their forte. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be nice if they did understand that. But then they bought into the project at that point, and that's what they heard, and they went about their lives. And they didn't hear more about things, because then you have your core group of people that are involved, right? You see the same faces all the time, which is great. It's great that we have community members involved on a regular basis. So I think that there was a lot of misinterpretation there from the community, and they didn't feel that it was, I heard on several occasions, why don't we know this? We never heard anything about this. Why didn't, so, and I know that people should be involved, but unfortunately, it's not a reality for most people to be involved at this level that come to meetings. So, I don't think that the buy-in, I don't know how we get it. Is it just boots on the ground? We all go door to door. I don't know how we get the buy-in. That might be the only solution to figure out what the community actually wants. Multiple choice, because you can't put multiple choice on the ballot. But so I think that that's where some of the breakdown was. People bought in the beginning, and they thought they got all the information that they needed, and then they went about their lives. So
Also, the people who wanted to fight this project took those numbers and drove it in that, oh, first it was 4 million and then it's 8 million. And I don't know, what was that first $4 million? Do you recall what?
Yeah. I wished I'd never requested it.
It was kind of like this initial, okay, how much would it cost to?
Went to ZCS, it was a engineering architectural company. And they give us the first three options. And that was, you know, again, like a moderate cleanup, da-dum. But that was as far as we had asked them to go. And then I asked them, well, you know, we're looking to do not just fix the buildings up, we're looking for something that will be a, you know, a usable community center. I said, you got any prices on that? And then they gave us that one price of, I think it was, Deanna, was it 399?
it was just, it was
3.99, I think it was.
389 or
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, but it was barely over the one that was the, you know, just fix everything. So, if you look at what it was included in it, they never did a design. It was just to get an order of magnitude price on what would happen in this facility like that. So, anyway, that's the background on it.
And then, and I think that that's what people bought into, and people did understand that number didn't include the $400,000 for the purchase of the building. And so I think they just kind of got stuck there.
Yeah.
And does that seem fair?
So what do you think you'd get for $4 million?
One of the buildings.
If that.
Able to be open to the public, maybe.
Yeah, and so that was, I mean, an unfortunate faux pas, right, to put that out to the public. I know the North Coast Conservancy, their building was 1.5 million, 1.2. Granted, this space on the estuary, it definitely comes with a lot more problems there, right? It's definitely a challenging space. But I don't know what the answer is. Again, myself, like, I know you are, Barb, you taught there and, you know, you had.
No, I didn't teach there.
Oh, you didn't teach there. Oh, I thought you.
Yeah, I taught at Broadway.
Okay.
She went,
But as soon as, no, I didn't go to school either.
Good story.
But as soon as I retired, I volunteered there.
Yeah.
And I also taught all those students that went there. And I've been a community member.
Yeah.
1982.
A long time.
Or some of you were born, and Rusty was one of my students. So that's all I got to say.
So, you know, geez, I mean, it would be nice.
Show.
And it would be nice to have a place for the kids to sing, you know, to do those kinds of things that we could all attend. We have a very somber event coming up that we really don't have space for our community. It'll be standing room only, I'm sure. So I just, you know, is it possible to have some kind of a gym I mean, we would have to start anew, I think, is the only kind of option. And we still need to absolutely pay tribute to Nakus, to the tribe. I think that that's important in some way. And, you know, what does that look like? And is it something that we start small with some of these things, and maybe it's not exactly the building that we want with all of the adornments, but as time goes on, we can add small things here and there. And I'm not talking about buildings. I'm just talking about some of these things. Granted, the cost might be a little more, but 3 years from now, to add whatever may need to be, you know, whatever we're going to add, but I think that we just really need to come back with something for the community that, and for the tribe that is a lot more palatable.
Are you thinking of something that doesn't use TLT money then? Talking about?
We could have, I think we should still have, I mean, I think it should be I kind of think it should be a split project and Tim's probably cringing back there. Then, there's juggling with funds, but I mean, it's absolutely possible to split the project. To where we use part TLT and part, general funds. Yeah.
So similar to how HRAP is funded, partially TLT, partially general funds.
Yeah.
And maybe some of that's appropriate, given the full scope of the project that we unanimously agreed on as council and move forward. Essentially, we were saving the school and creating a area for community recreation, all within the TLT dollars. But I think the no vote essentially is I mean, the school is the gymnasium is the one that I don't understand how we can save, because I mean, really the big use for that is community recreation and maybe community events. And so that's money that's probably more appropriate, So I wonder what the general obligation bond would look like, what the vote would look like to save the school for basketball and pickleball. I'm guessing it wouldn't go well, but.
So is it possible to? Do you think if it's even a probability, and I know this is just an off the cuff question, and to put something in that has a gymnasium or a community space with classrooms, food pantry, that we could do something feasible there at a greatly reduced cost?
But we need to know what that cost.
Well, no, I know.
Be a number.
Yeah.
And that includes, are you talking about demolition of? So that then demolition costs have to be included in.
That would be about 500.
That's 500,000 to start with.
We either need to decide what we want, what kind of facility we want to have, or we need to say a number and see what we can get for it.
I think it's got to be the number.
Right, because that's why that seems to be what tanked the vote in favor of the project, was the amount of money.
I think that we should definitely try and I think we should definitely keep the number under half of the gross revenue. Try. We can.
So 5.6.
Is that what it is? Yeah, I think it.
Close enough, Tim?
The gross revenue that was in the bond or the
Ballot measure.
the ballot measure. Currently, again, open to wide interpretation, would probably be around 5.6.
I believe that's what I said.
Yep.
So that's a 5,000 square foot facility. Roughly, judging by these numbers for between demolition and the high end construction costs. That's what that number buys us.
And is that split between TLT and general fund, or is it general fund, or is it TLT?
I guess it depends on what it is. It sounds like to me, it's what we had envisioned as an interpretive center to honor the Nichols Village, and I hope either center. And that should be totally funded by TLT.
What about, and the space for classes? Do you envision that in it? And a gathering place, or do you think the gathering place is impossible at that budget, to have a gathering place and classrooms?
Not for a big concert or
Right.
Yeah, I think we've lost that opportunity.
No pickle.
Unless we
Yeah.
somehow have a sudden change. That, okay, well, 12, 14,
But is
15
it-
million is fine.
That's
We'll
not.
find another way.
Is it, is
You know.
there a probability that maybe we could, for that cost, have a place where we could gather? Under
What do you mean
300
gather, I guess is,
or a community type space?
What if we spent 5.6 million on general fund and 5.6 million in PLP?
We can't because of the ballot measure. We have to spend less money.
well, if the ballot measure, citizen
According to
ballot measure
city.
passes in May. I don't think we have any hope of doing the project at all. I mean, it would be so far down the line. That it would have to be years in the designing and buy-in that's going to get us a 50% vote. And then the vote to take place and, but yes, factually, you're correct that, if it does pass, then it goes beyond the 5.6 million. Is that what the number was?
Broad interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then we'd be limited to that, or it turns it into a years-long project of having it predefined and getting on the ballot and.
Can I make a suggestion?
Betty, did you want to say something? Oh, yep.
We decided to just do a gym. I'm wondering how we would afford it in the future. Because if we have what we planned, we would get the TLT money every year, and then it would. We wouldn't have to raise our taxes. So I just feel like, let's not forget that the TLT was gonna keep our programs going, and it was gonna not put the pressure on our community. So I think those are important things that keep in the front of our mind.
I'm not sure I'm following you.
When you have the TLT money coming every year.
But as far as the gymnasium, to have,
If we only have the gymnasium to.
if you only have it,
Pickleball and basketball, how are we gonna raise money?
yeah, no, that would have to be total, general obligation bond or general fund. The funding is not there for it.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Nothing's gonna pay for it, so we're gonna have to raise taxes.
It would have to go to a vote.
So that's why people didn't want it in the first place, because they didn't understand that the TLT would not, we wouldn't have to raise our taxes. So to me, that's an important part of it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tim? Can you give us some broad?
Interpretation.
There's a seat, there's a chair up here for you. Name on it.
I'll just stand right here.
Okay.
So, part of, I guess, one of the things that we have discussed is the use of TLT monies to pay for those programs inside of the general fund. Or portions of them, for instance, public restrooms, HRAP. Okay. Those are currently all paid for by the general fund. Okay, so those are all general fund dollars. We have no TRT going to backfill those programs. So if you take the TRT and you're backfilling HRAP, half of HRAP, or you're backfilling half of the public restrooms, those are general fund dollars that are currently not allocated that could be allocated for some projects. I'm not saying this project, but they could be allocated for other projects, whatever you want. But there is flexibility once we use for the TLT to be able to get to be able to have a more discretionary way to spend it. But
Are you saying that we don't use any TLT, any tourism restricted TLT dollars currently for restrooms?
we currently use none for restrooms. We currently use none for we currently really use
None for HRAP.
none for HRAP at the current. That is one of our proposals for the 25-26 budget cycle.
Okay,
So I just want to bring that to your attention. Nothing has been decided, of course, but that is,
That would free up some money in the general fund.
there can be some money in the general. Good idea.
I thought we were already funding half of HRAP.
We have not funded any of it. We have discussed being able to fund roughly 50% of it. We figure that is very defensible. Same with the restrooms. So just between those two is $300,000-400,000.
yeah, I remember
Broadly speaking.
having those,
Probably from a broad perspective.
we're having some of those conversations about the funding for City Hall and Police Station of offsetting some of those costs of restrooms. And I recall we had a percentage. It wouldn't be appropriate to fund 100% of the restroom maintenance.
Correct. And that's
Some of it's City Hall.
part of, so we do already have, actually, the attorneys have already stated what we can do. They draft, they are currently going to draft us up something with regards to the public restrooms and I think bike aids, and there was another program I can't think of off the top of my head, but and so once we get that, and again, from a conservative approach, those programs at 50% is fair. So.
Thank you.
So yes, if we limit a project to 5.6 million, I mean, that just happens to be the project that I glanced at here. That's essentially $500,000 for demolishing the two buildings and building a 5,000 square foot new construction. Although there could be saving the classroom wing. I don't see any option for saving the gymnasium. Unless you see, oh, we could actually divide that up into and turn it into the interpretive center.
You know, it comes, what is the program for the project? If it was, it's too small a structure right now to be used as a proper gymnasium, right? You can barely get a high school basketball court in there with any standing room around it. And that's 7,000 square feet. Ben over here is crunching numbers about as fast as we can talk. And for $5.6 million, and remember that we're talking hard costs and soft costs. And at this level, not having a design, assume that your soft costs are going to be about 30% of the overall cost of the project. That's your architecture and engineering fees. That's your jurisdictional fees, what the city of Cannon Beach is going to charge. For permitting fees, for any SDC fees, that's testing, that's FF&E, that's owner contingency. So that's 30% of the project. So when we talk about $5.6 million, what can we build for that? Take out 30% off the top. And what you're left with
There goes my project.
is about 3,000 to 3,500 square foot building. That's much smaller than even the classroom building that's on site now. So can it be used for gathering? Sure, but not.
Sounds like there's some cost efficiency based on the 766 dollars per square foot to save the current structures. There might be some cost savings in using.
Would be?
I'm sorry?
Do you think there would be any cost savings to save the current classroom building?
Well,
So let me just recap what I thought I heard is the three options that we were going to take away and do some work on. So one would be, what can we get for 5.6 billion project cost, right? And Dustin had some words there about what soft costs were and such, and those are accurate. The second option would be if we demo the gym and rehab the classrooms, what does that look like from a cost perspective? And the third option would be if we demo the classroom and rehab the gym. There's lots of other philosophical and societal questions that you all need to talk with constituents about doing those, and what does that deliver for the community? Is that the product that the community is looking for? But it's helpful for us to hear feedback. I think we were a little unsure where we were supposed to be going at this point. We thought we were doing the service that was asked of us where, 12 million was too much. So pull the project back, got to the 9 million. I feel like that kind of reset the baseline at that 8.2 to 9.2. I know I'm getting those numbers wrong now, but that range we've been talking about. But it's helpful for us to hear what everyone is looking for, what we think we're looking for. So it's been helpful to hear the conversation and be here. And I think we have a better understanding somewhat, but I think we're still all kind of trying to figure out what exactly we're doing. But we could provide an analysis of those three options if that would be helpful to determine how the project moves forward.
Can I just add a quick note on the question that was asked about, could there be a savings in saving one building or the other? If you're just looking at square footage, can there be a savings to refurbishing that gym versus building a new 7,000 square foot gym? Yes, there could, but not every square foot is the same, right? So you could spend a little bit more than that building a new 7,000 square foot building, but then you get the building that is designed for exactly the purpose it was designed for. So there's value in those buildings. Having done all the community outreach we've done, and from 2.5 years ago to today, there's a lot of sentiment in those buildings, whether a lot of the sentiment in keeping those buildings was from people who either went to the school or dropped their kids off at that school or taught at that school. There is value in that heritage. What is that value? Because you kind of lose it on the back end. I don't think you're going to find many developers who would look at developing that as, say, a commercial property, who would really consider keeping those buildings because they are emotionally detached from those buildings. It's no significance to them, but they are significant. They're significant to this community. So what is that value? And then that needs to be considered. And do we spend the money in rehabbing these buildings? You've seen what the ticket is just to get them to some usable form, but that's not even considering what use could potentially go into them. So they'll never be as efficient a building for the purpose you assign them to than a new building.
And they're not going to look the same. The gym might look somewhat similar, but I don't think those classrooms, like you're going to have to take all the brick off, and you'd have to, I don't know if there's dry rot inside underneath in the walls, et cetera. I just
refurbish them.
Yeah.
The gym building would very much look the same. I mean, it could, right? And that's what's in that number is that we're not adding new openings. Whatever openings are there, yeah, they get new windows, new doors, same siding, but new siding, but siding to match what's there, and asphalt roofing, which is what's there now. So it would very much look the same.
Yeah.
But it's not an energy efficient green building under any stretch of the imagination if you refurbish it.
Or a facility in any way.
Yeah, part of the act of refurbishing, you do trigger energy code upgrades. So what is included in that number is bringing that envelope, what we would call it, up to meet current energy code.
Okay. But I think that the NRDC building is what you would call a green building, the way they've constructed it.
How big is it?
How many square feet is that? I don't know.
I don't know, but I was at a presentation on Saturday and
Right.
there had way more people than they anticipated coming. And it was like, you had to ask permission if you wanted to raise your hand there was no, it was packed. And I looked out the beautiful windows. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful building, but it's limited. I mean, it's a workspace for an organization, and they let, Friends of Haystack Rock have a presentation there, and it was packed.
Yeah, in my mind, if this is going to be a cultural and environmental center, it seems like we need 5,000 square feet. That would be 2 classrooms that could become 1, where there could be a presentation like you're talking about, some actual exhibit space, and then whatever kind of public spaces are adequate for that. I can't see it, and maybe I'm even underestimating at 5,000 square feet to say that we could get by with that little. But in my mind, those 2 classrooms that could become 1, and then interpretive public space was kind of the core.
What did you say the current gym, how many square feet is that?
Current gym's about 7,000 square feet. That doesn't include the mezzanine that's in there, which isn't usable to the public anyways.
And what about the classroom area? How many square feet?
That's about 5,000 square feet.
So, okay, that's 5,000. Okay, so that would be same size as the current classroom area.
Yeah, the classrooms are 4880 and the Quonset hut is 7415.
Yeah, so.
And then what would you do with the space of whichever you're gonna demolish over my dead body?
Parking lot.
Parking lot, yeah. You'd have parking.
I
Or-
would say partially park, partially parking.
Right.
To have a clean thoroughfare for the food pantry.
Mhm. Yeah.
Clean up the flow of traffic in that neighborhood with the additional space that only having one building there would afford you.
I would add one more piece of consideration in, again, going back to community outreach and, listening to what people want. And again, without a budget, we held that community outreach. There was no budget attached to it. It was just, what do people want? And I think that was very intentional. But part of that is, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. I'll gain it back.
It happens.
Look at this.
I do that all the time.
I think if we got back to it.
I'm
Back.
Back.
Okay, good.
Don't
Go ahead.
interrupt him.
Right. No, part of it was that this is a historically sensitive site with potential archaeological artifacts right beneath the soil. So part of the allure of keeping these buildings was trying to keep the development footprint as small as possible and the overall interruption to the site.
You want to add anything, Todd? You mentioned archaeology earlier.
Yes, I had a nice conversation and a beer before I came here in a great space, which makes me think it is the Pelican Brewery.
Mm.
When I was sitting there, I thought, oh, that is the gym space, but everyone knows my bias on keeping the gym. So the archaeological ramifications, and I agree with what you were saying there, are complex. And actually, some people like parking lots over archaeological areas because it keeps them safe, right? And it prevents people from digging and whatnot. So the consensus with the tribe is we think it would be a bummer to put a parking lot in the park, and it's not going to solve the the summer parking problem. And but that's for you guys to decide. But as far as protecting the archaeological integrity, we can make that happen. It'll take some monitoring. It'll take some bureaucracy because, as you know, we're not federally recognized, and the code requires a review of certain types of disturbances, new construction. So if we tear it down, there's like gradients. So this is a type 2 infraction onto this archaeological area. This is a type 3, so you got to go. So we would have to get the federally recognized tribe, which is in this area, which is Siletz, would have to review the process. I don't think it's not, they wouldn't be against it, but it would be a process, and then there would be required monitoring during excavation of different types and some more studies probably, even though we've already done some work, it would require more. But luckily we wouldn't be like you were saying before about, you know, we're not starting from scratch and there's a survey and all that. It would be cumbersome, but not impossible. And the tribe isn't against it if it's done with care, which it has to be done with care. It's not an option, right? None of what I just said is an option. It's the federal law. So does that help?
Yeah.
No,
Actually,
go ahead. Oh, I was just gonna say, I don't think we're trying to solve the summer parking problem with it. It was just parking for the facility.
Right.
That's all we're
Yeah,
doing.
you're not gonna do that either. Yeah, I mean, the parking code requires 59 parking spots, I think was the number. So my point is, I know you're not trying to solve the problem, but I think the food bank circulation, which Eric mentioned, is key to the success for the site, but adding 3 parking spots, adding 7 parking spots, it's almost an attractive nuisance. I don't see it. I think it deters from the site, but that's just my opinion. I am an architect and we're still going to get a variance for the parking code no matter what we do. And so.
Well, and how many, you know, you're just adding parking then for the park. Or an interpret center. And so how many spots do you need for an interpretive center?
Well, 5,000 with 25 spots, I bet. That's a lot. That's my point.
Yeah.
Get a variance, yeah, that's true.
So you're gonna get a variance either way. Again, I'm not the architect.
it would be less than that with our current code, I believe. The plan that was proposed only required, I think, 34 parking spots, and then that was varianced down to 7.
Okay, so 17 then or something.
Yeah, something.
Which isn't doable. I mean, if you want to keep any sort of play area or whatever, again, getting ahead of the cart before the horse, but yeah. You have another question?
I had a question about the monitoring and stuff like that. You may probably won't have an answer off the top of your head, maybe, I don't know. What level of disturbance changes us from the category that we're currently in for monitoring and the status having to come and monitor it versus?
And it wouldn't necessarily be Silet's monitoring. Silet's would approve the plan. Okay, they're gonna give us the okay to do the project.
Mhm.
And then they might add a rider of some sort that would, under these conditions and these special things.
So did the current plan already have the existing plan, the 12.4 have?
So from memory, we had the review and it didn't require additional monitoring beyond the minimal.
Because we weren't demolishing.
Because we were demolishing.
We're digging.
There is
digging. It's
a small added footprint.
Right.
Limited to the small added footprint.
Weren't you doing some post holes in a couple little areas and?
Yeah, we were. There's trenching to fix some of the sewer lines everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere we were excavating and new footings for seismic. Everywhere that we were excavating was going to require there to be some level of monitoring.
Okay. And
an IDP, which is a incidental discovery plan, so that if you did run into an archaeological artifact, that there's already a plan in place for how to deal with that.
Exactly, kind of a recipe and that's what gets reviewed by Silet's. They sort of sign off on the plan.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I don't see a problem getting the sign off. It's just, more time. And my apologies. I didn't mean to be flip about the parking.
No, I didn't take it that way.
About parking. I deal with it every day. It's parking's no fun.
I always
agree.
Thought it was a bad idea to.
Yeah. So, and just to reiterate, we love the food bank. The tribe loves the food bank. So we're all on board with making that a better run operation. They do great stuff on Schuster.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Mary Beth?
I am hearing a lot of discussion about making this a 5,000 square foot space. And what I heard around the community was, we want a community gathering space. What is the fire marshal's occupancy for 5,000 square feet? How much of a community gathering can you have in 5,000 square feet?
We're not gonna have big performing arts and concerts.
I don't know that you can have a block party in there.
If you live on a.
Oh, I think you can.
You can have a lecture.
Well,
We can-
block you can, because there's only 3 of us live on the block, the rest are short-term rentals, but yeah, to your point.
We can,
Justin, do you have an answer for that?
well, we can stuff a lot of people in 5,000 square feet, but we can't because
Not legally.
we're limited to 299 occupants on that site without triggering a higher level risk category and having to do all kinds of tsunami design or upgrades.
So if we leave it at,
Existing buildings or new buildings.
so if we leave it at 13,000 square feet or it's 500 square feet, the
Still limited.
occupancy is 1999.
That's right.
This room has an occupancy of 44.
Right.
I don't know how many square feet this room
Roughly.
is, but what
This
I'm
is roughly 1,000 square feet.
okay, so 5,000 square feet has a maximum occupancy of, I'm not talking about the whole property, I'm talking about the building, because a lot of the time during the year, outside is not an option.
Yeah. So, I mean, per code for 5,000 square feet, you can do standing space, right, at 5 square feet per occupant and get to 1,000.
And that's
Occupancy.
okay with the fire.
But really, I mean, we'd be talking more like maybe 2,000 square feet of some kind of event space. If we're talking about a total facility of 5,000 square feet.
That was.
I don't know, am I,
Say that again?
we'd really be talking about an event space of about 2,000 square feet. If our total facility is 5,000 square feet, that includes the restrooms and lobby and entry and interpretive space.
You know, it just depends that not all community events are the same, right? Some of them, if it's a Taylor Swift concert, okay, that's gonna be your 5 occupants per square foot load. That's as dense a load as you're gonna get. But if it's,
5 feet.
Thank you, Mary.
what's that?
Yeah, twist it around.
I guess I'm thinking about the way we had it designed with the last 2 classrooms being open.
5 square feet.
Last 2 classrooms, if they were opened up into one space, how many people could we fit in there?
You're limited to 299. But if you didn't have that limit on it, realistically, use probably the 15 square foot, 1 occupant per 15 square feet. And you're,
Calculator out.
yeah, exactly.
Did you talk about the tsunami rule? I didn't know that applied to assemblies and less than
333.
high school.
Yeah, so this
299 is so.
It's the max, right? Yeah.
assembly occupancies that have an occupant load of over 300 or 300 or over. They trigger risk category 3. And risk category 3, if A occupancies of 300 or more occupants require the tsunami.
I did not know that.
It was a House bill passed in Oregon in 2023.
Tim?
I think we all ought to sort of address the obvious thing in the room. If you under-design this or put up a prefab structure or something like that, you will lose a ton of support of people who supported the previous project. So you're kind of in I think, a bind where I would work really hard to oppose a $5 million or 5,000 square foot project. I can't imagine that being worth anything to the city. I would rather see it scraped and become a green space than to something substandard there. So I don't know, it's a box that none of us wanted to be in, but please, if you ask these people to engineer for $5.5 million, the only people who are going to benefit are the people who are drawing the plans, because it's never going anywhere.
Why does it have to be prefab? Is that what do you think that would have to be some kind of prefab structure?
I'm just envisioning something that has, to paraphrase Dustin's comments from 2 years ago, none of the magic.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
lots of
well,
magic.
that's for sure. I mean, the magic's been voted out, so, yeah, that's for sure. But I'm just saying that if we wanted just to have something like NRDC or smaller, I don't know how big it is, that's the problem, but something like that, with maybe some nice windows looking out on the river, but it wouldn't be, no, you're right. It's none of it's not going to have the magic. It would just be a functional building. That's it.
Taylor Swift's there.
Yes, she's gonna be.
She's not coming here.
Building that might raise our taxes. I'm voting no on that every time.
What do you mean raise our taxes?
Well, if it's funded with GO.
Oh,
Well, if it was a 5,000 square foot building, it would be an interpretive center and it would be TRT funds.
yeah, I don't
And
know that anybody's suggesting that.
and the tax raising thing, I think that is it's a broad statement, and I understand the scariness behind people thinking that their property taxes are going to go up. But don't property tax increases have to go on the ballot? 3%, but hasn't that pretty much been happening across the board every year? So property taxes are going to go up every year anyway. Because they can't be taxed at their assessed value. Otherwise, the city would have oodles of money because property taxes have gone up, or property values have gone up so much. So in order for property taxes to be raised, it would have to be in the form of a bond, correct, Bruce? It would have to be in the form of a bond that would be voted on. And I can't imagine that voters would probably vote for that. So, so the chances of property taxes going up are very small because it's usually the no vote when somebody wants to raise your property.
Seemed like the threat about property taxes going up was if we do full faith and credit financing and
Vaulted.
the sky falls, that we're gonna have to make up that money.
Or that our tourism, for some reason, completely.
Yeah,
dwindles.
stops.
Yeah. Which is not gonna happen.
Unless the big one comes.
Right.
And then we have other things to work.
Right, then we've got a lot bigger things.
That's not.
I wish I could have a crystal ball and say that tourism will never drop off. That would be amazing.
Yeah, it would be amazing.
Drop off.
But it is, and the month of February, I think everybody's really feeling that it is, it's down. People are holding on to their money.
Yeah, I don't think anybody says it's not gonna drop off. It goes up.
But
and
it'll
down.
change. Yeah, it'll change. Yeah, right. We have ebbs and flows. So,
Well, I guess with that, do you have a clear
Let's go.
idea of?
Let's go over your homework assignment.
Yeah,
We were told earlier that what we were gonna hear is, we don't understand the cost. But I hope what we are is realistic about the cost now, because it seems like there have been unrealistic expectations created all the way through this. So I hope if tonight did anything, we're realistic about the costs.
So we're giving you 5.6 million. What are you gonna give us?
what are our options?
Food.
Various scenarios. Demolition of one building, demolition of the other building. Taking it all down, starting from scratch and putting up a functional space?
It seems like an exercise in futility to me, honestly, but
Which one? All of it?
what we can do for 5.6. I mean, maybe it's,
Pay some consultants and.
we can spend 30% of that, first of all, on the soft costs, which leaves us the remainder to do the construction, which means we're somewhere under, well under 5,000 square feet, which is that gonna give us a facility that works? I don't know.
Is it a facility that you need? I think we can make it a working facility, but is it a facility? Are you doing it just to do it, or are you doing it because you need it and want it? And I think,
Well, and can I ask a question just for maybe, not even so much giggles, but what if we did turn it into a nice park and put a longhouse on it? Is that possible? I mean,
A longhouse is not really a usable,
Talking about? You're talking
not
about
usable for anything.
real longhouse?
well,
A
something that,
recreation of a longhouse.
but I think, couldn't we might be able to do something that was usable in an interpretive way. Maybe? Am I reaching? I might be reaching.
no, I mean,
Like a well park, but instead it's a well park that we have here in town.
Yeah,
Something like that, but it's a longhouse.
but in an interpretive kind of way, so it's actually,
Have you been to the
Someplace-
one in Fort Stevens?
Yeah, yeah.
It's really just,
Not there anymore.
what's that?
it's not there anymore. Yeah.
Okay,
That's something about.
yeah,
Okay,
it's
well-
not a usable space.
And like I said, I was just throwing a question.
Yeah, we're definitely
out.
brainstorming. We'll take any
Yeah.
ideas.
that particular question, I feel like needs to be asked within the sentiment of the tribe. And if that holds any value to them. And one thing that we were very careful of in starting this project based on the very first outreach event that we had, which was with the tribe, was not to create something that felt, Disneylandish. And so that's the one problem you have with that is if it is truly to be a longhouse with genuine interpretive value, it's going to cost, quite a bit for that. And their longhouses, it's probably something that you want to be able to remove during the winter months and re-erect so that you get more life out of it. There's a lot of complications involved with it.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
What drives the 5.6 mark? Is it something happened in the vote in November or?
It was just half of what, it was just a number thrown out as half, actually.
Clearly, this project is going to go past the May election. And after May, if that citizen and measure passes, that's what we'd be limited to without going for a vote on any project that exceeds that.
Thank you.
So it's possible that, and hopefully it will be defeated, because it really ties the city's hands in so many ways and will just drive up the cost of everything and slow everything down. That would not be a limiting factor in this, but.
Thanks.
Right now, that's kind of like worst case scenario. That's we could do something without it becoming some kind of long-term success. Come up with other great ideas, okay?
So if I can just recap what I think the homework assignment, I like that terminology for it. So we've talked around this a little bit, but based on the 5.6 number, what can we get for a size of a building? So we can look at that can model that out. The second one would be if we demoed the gym and rehab the classroom with some allowance for site work around that. how does that compare to the 5.6 target? And then the third option, really looking at demoing the classroom and rehabbing the gym, again, with some site components to that. How does that compare to the 5.6? And if we brought those three pieces of information back, does that sound like what the council's looking for?
Yeah, that'd be really helpful.
I think the complication in demoing the classroom and saving the gym is somehow that space has to be turned into something that would qualify for the tourism dollars. And if it's just a gymnasium, I'm sorry, but it doesn't. Was probably one of the issues with the outreach event in the beginning is if we were planning on using tourism dollars, we probably should have given people more a menu of choices rather than pickleball turning out to be the number one, reason people wanted it.
By a landslide.
I know, but I'd still like to see all three options. Including the idea of keeping the gym as one of the,
Okay.
it's because there's some people who love that building.
I guess it can't hurt to see it
Yeah,
in
exactly.
case we want to
Right.
fund it with general fund or something, but
A big indoor
have a-
pickleball court.
or if it could actually be converted into some kind of interpretive space.
Yeah, I think that's something we could work with our partners at CETA on looking at that and bringing some information back to the council. Is that good for you, Dustin?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, this has been helpful to hear. I think it's, we're talking through some challenging issues. And so this is,
I have one more question. You have three options. Was one of the options, I was trying to type my notes, keep up with what you're saying. Was one of the options, what is 5.6 get us demo and start with something new? Is that one of the research topics, or was it 5.6 of the existing structures?
Yes.
Or one or the other?
that would be option number one. So 5 points.
That's option one.
Right.
Okay, all right.
What size building can we get for, if it was a new building on a demolished site?
Okay, cool. Thanks.
And I would be curious to know, but I don't know if we want to go there. If we had to add another $1 million to make it really work, or another 1.25 million, or what, if it just doesn't work for what we've got there, what it would take to make it work at that level, at that lower level.
Right. I think maybe expanding on that exercise, what would be helpful is we understand what size building we can get for 5.6 million. We'll work with our partners at CETA to understand, what kind of an optimal size building might be for what we understand. We think the function desired for the space is, and maybe what the increase would be to step up to that if it was a new building. And that way you're kind of looking at all the angles.
Right.
So you think 20%?
Scratch our heads what that optimal footage size is, but.
Thank you.
I just want
Oh, you wanted to say something? I thought you were leaving.
Waving goodbye.
I thought you were.
Tried
Uh-oh.
phasing component to the financing. Like,
Everything's up for discussion right now.
I'm
other than
I'm not sure with the measure if it passes. It seemed like there were some things about cumulative cost.
Yes, there are cumulative, you can't do several.
Oh, no, you can't, right.
Several bond issues
Right.
under the limit to go over the limit.
Okay, then my question becomes, well, what about doing the park landscaping and trail and other park improvements? Is that the same project?
It's.
Or do you find that in general fund?
If you're not borrowing money, if that money is money that you build up and reserve specifically for it, sort of thing. So you phase it as he's mentioning. So you fund whatever the project comes out to, 5.6 million. You borrow 5.6 million, and that doesn't include landscaping. And you have X dollars that you put aside that you're not borrowing. That's excess above what you need to pay for to go into the reserves or park reserves or whatever.
So it's only
Different
it's only about borrowing. It's not about the total project cost.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
If so, then the 3.4 million we have in cash covers a lot issue needs to be taken into account. So we're really not talking about a cap of 5.6, we're talking about a cap of 9.
No, because you've already,
What I just said is wrong.
because you can't go past the revenue of 5.6, so you couldn't go
talking about
past
borrowing.
that borrowing, including the money you've already.
I thought I just asked the question and they said that it's only about the borrowing amount, not the cash amount.
Teddy has already borrowed the money they have on their books right now.
I
If
understand
the
that.
incremental bond issue is 5.6 million, that doesn't trigger anything. So that leaves you with $9 million.
It does trigger, it would trigger.
Love to see your legal opinion.
Yeah, and I think
Kim?
it's very,
It's broad. That's that it's
it's very broad. So right now, we have debt that was issued prior that did not apply, that would not have been under this new legislation. Okay, so anything that we issue prior to May does not go under this legislation. Beginning May 1 or May, whatever the election day is, passes the next day, anything after that does. Now, does your previous issue plus the new issue violate the intent? I don't know. Again, this is very broad. Again, the way that the new ballot measure is written or the to put into effect the debt cap is really, really broad. And a lot of what's going to have to be clarified will eventually have to be clarified by the council.
That's something that we would clarify.
You will have to clarify. And so, once, if the word passed, you would have to clarify. So does it fit? Again, we're very broad, do not know.
Bruce, don't run out.
Oh, no,
I don't want to let Tim's comment go because, I mean, I think he's, onto something. So how much money do we have in cash now that's unspent on the tourism facility?
3.4 million.
3.4. That's the number you were talking about?
That's the number I just mentioned, I believe.
It is.
So we are talking about 9 million. Is that what you said?
That was the number I just mentioned, I believe.
Okay. Thank you. So I don't know if that changes our conversation,
So-
but
I think we would need to get legal, we would need city attorney to weigh in. on
Sure, I
it.
think it's a combination of the council clarifying and you would need the attorney, city attorney to do it.
I mean, 9 million to me is starting to sound like maybe we can get there. 5.6 to me is like,
But Lisa suggested coming back with about a 20% variance. Like, what can we do for this? But then what could we do with that 20% variance?
for another million or another 1.5 or something.
Now do you understand your homework? For extra credits.
points. And maybe, right, and we're still collecting money on the tourism facility. So in how many,
And making good interest on the money.
in how many months, what are we going to have that could possibly be added to it? I think you need to know that maybe there's some option there.
Does that help?
There's some reserves and things, right? That we've had some.
We're gonna share.
9 million instead of 5.6, I would hope that would help.
Yeah.
There is $2 million a year coming in TLT that needs to be spent. So I think I gave you all, not you all, but I gave some of the council members some analysis I did. That was sort of the save your money for a rainy day. If you're generating $2 million a year, it doesn't really take that long to get a substantial amount of.
And that's money that's already dedicated to the tourism project.
That's right. So I mean, I think the risk of insulting the process, you're asking people to spend money on consultants when really we ought to better formulate what the true goal is. This was a number that was purely grabbed out of the air. It's 5.6.
Well, based on the ballot measure, calculations. But you're correct as far as what we want as a facility.
You know, we've got $2 million.
I mean, from the issue though, even if you did say that it was 9 and you went for the issue, then somebody who disagrees and does say that it's a cumulative thing, then they sue.
Yeah.
Which is, and gets us exactly in the
Backwards.
same spot we are in now, except even worse. So.
Another reason may.
Yeah, very important.
That's what I'm here for.
Thanks a lot.
So what kind of timeline do you think you're looking at to get that kind of information realistically?
Is that something you'd allow us to talk internally and come back to you?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
we're throwing a lot at
Of
you.
course.
I think we really want to talk with our group here as well. So we're making sure what we commit to is what we're delivering.
Okay.
Tell you something and not be able to look
All right.
the second.
Well,
That's
and to Tim's point, you know, what are we trying to get to? I think I've made my wish list pretty clear. I would like to see that cultural and environmental interpretive center.
But we have to look at all of them, all the options. But education's always been my important.
Well, flexible space that would add education and small events and, you know, that kind of.
A community
flexible.
center.
Where we were going with this is just like, I don't think we're ever gonna get to a gym. And I hope that's, you know, being realistic about the costs, not anything else.
And there's others who just want to see it be a community center. So, you know. I mean, there's.
So I don't know what a community center means. I mean, it would be a community center in that there would be flexible
Yeah. It could
classroom
be
space
used.
where people could come and
Right.
have their community meetings but would not be a rec center.
Right.
I feel like that's what we're giving up.
Yeah. Agree.
You guys have visions for what you think is,
I think we've discussed, I mean, I don't have an opinion there. I would like to see what they come back with.
well, they're not gonna come back with what we're going to do with the space. They're gonna come back with what kind of space they can do within a
Right,
budget.
and then we can figure out what we're gonna do with the space.
Eric, you have any thoughts?
Mostly revolves around a lot of what I'm hearing here is opposition to the rec portion of this being TLT funded.
You hear opposition?
Among the council here that's a permissible use of the restricted TLT funds, the recreation portion of the facility. I don't think there's as hard a line against that in the state statutes about recreation facilities. It could be harder than I imagine it is, but I don't see that as such a hard division of a recreation center not being able to be funded. But we have classroom space in town at the Tolovana Arts Colony, at the Chambers, kind of a classroom-ish size sort of space. And I worry we're duplicating efforts by focusing on the classroom space thoughts of this facility, as opposed to the other aspects, the open recreation aspects of the site. That's not something that's needed within the community as opposed to something that's just, that there's a want for a new classroom facility as opposed to a need for a recreation facility. My understandable?
No, I.
So
I-
you,
Okay.
you would say, you would prefer we keep the gym and keep it as a recreational center and try to use TLT funds with it? Cause I'm not positive.
Or splitting those costs from general fund as Tim Collier noted, the 300 to 400,000 approximate that would be coming back in. That's $4 million worth of purchasing power of funds.
So you're interested in a recreation center, not an interpretive center.
Recreation / interpretive. You can, I feel like that you can't, one doesn't preclude the other.
If you keep the gym, how does that become an interpretive center?
You have interpretive elements within the center. Much of the gym had interpretive elements in the 12.4 million.
Well, sure, there was some
Mhm.
design work for the, you know, for the soundboards and everything on the, you know, but that's not an interpretive center. You have, just because you have some, you know, Nikus patterned sound elements, that does not make it an interpretive center.
Plus, what if somebody throws a basketball at?
Right. I mean, it just doesn't. I think, I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't, I agree, we should have all the three options and look at them all, but you know, I think that if you're going to have it as a gym, a recreation center, you're not going to have it as an interpretive center too. Not with just that building. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Tim?
I think the way it worked before, I don't remember the exact language, but it was a project, a parcel, and we were using a substantial amount of it for tourism related facilities. So therefore, not every piece needs to be tourism related, but the entire project is substantially tourism related.
Must have the substantial purpose of.
So by shrinking the project, you give yourself a little bit less latitude.
Yeah.
What you might be able to do.
And I would be uncomfortable spending TLT dollars on something that we really know is a place for kids to shoot hoops in the winter and locals to play pickleball.
I would too. But again,
We've already been told that would be a risk.
a huge.
Actually, we've been told legally that that would be a risk.
Yeah.
So I'm all for pushing TLT money. I'm really radical about it,
We
but
know that.
not to the point where we know it's going to fail.
Yeah.
And we're going to end up in trouble. That, you know, I don't think it's open for interpretation.
Lisa, what do you see for use of a facility?
I actually like the idea of having it be an interpretive center and then having small, you know, having areas where, I mean, it's not going to be, you know, you could have one class in there maybe, you know, just like at Tolovana Arts Colony, you can only have one class. You can't have multiple classes going on in Tolovana, and you couldn't in this facility the way it's being described now as a 5,000 square foot building after you know. But, you know, you could have you could have probably library lecture series, something like that, which attracts at the most 50 people.
Is Paystack Rock still doing their series at the library?
No, they switched over did it at the chamber one year, and this year we're not even doing it. So, you know.
Because
it just was logistically too difficult.
And it was just attracting
The same people all the time.
and the summer art camp by the Art Association.
The summer art
Still at
camp is at the church, which is
church.
horrible.
Yeah,
It's a ridiculous place to have an art camp.
I don't buy that we wouldn't have a good use for
Yeah.
classroom
I mean,
education.
would the art camp fit in?
Whether, maybe not entirely, but maybe some of the classes wouldn't, if they were split between that and Tolovana Arts Colony. You could possibly get enough you know, space in there to have that art camp.
Yeah.
You know, but, because the church is tiny, the rooms were tiny.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not, they're rugs on the floors. That's not suitable for anything, you know, art wise. So you couldn't clean them up adequately. So it was just a mess, you know.
Yeah, everything I heard from the Tourism and Arts Commission was a limiting factor on just about every event was lack of facilities.
Yeah.
Can I put you on the spot, Madam Mayor?
You know what I want. I want.
You want to save both buildings?
Yes. But if we're gonna choose, I would go the interpretive route. But we're still open for discussion.
I think it is important, as Tim mentioned, that we should know, at least have an idea of what the use of the facility is.
We did.
Maybe we did. I don't know.
Well, I think we have enough to be dangerous. And we'll come back with the timeline after we talk internally about what it's going to take to put numbers to these different options. And if nothing else, it'll give you another sort of benchmark.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You know what 12.4 million is going to get you, and then you'll know what 5.6 million is going to get you.
And if we're in reach of something else.
That's right.
Yeah.
Bonus came?
Bonus points.
Extra credit.
Extra credit.
Metal temporary building.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, audience members, for suggestions.
Yeah, that was.
You,
We are gonna have. Hey, we're back on the recording. So next we have the short-term rental cap discussion. Would you like to prepare the staff report?
Sure. At the retreat, good evening, Mayor, Council. At the retreat, there was just some general discussion about STRs. We really didn't go into much. I think the biggest thing that was discussed about was potentially the cap. Numbers where we're at right now are about 192 with 149 14-day and 43 lifetimes. Every year, a couple of lifetimes kind of transfer, and those will eventually sunset. All the 5-year short-term rentals have sunsetted. So my understanding is in the period of since I've been here, it's been roughly about, I would say 190 to about 210, 200 since I've been here. But my understanding is it's kind of been in that 185, 210-ish, approximately for totals. And so from January of 24 to January of 25, we varied from about 191 to 197. So the idea was mentioned about a cap. In terms of discussion, you know, I know the next time that Marcy comes for one of our joint sessions, this could also be something, you know, informed by the council that maybe we want to start looking at STR sooner as part of the zoning code amendments. So I know she's going to be coming in with Alyssa March 4th. And that was more on some of the housing stuff. So that could, in my mind, I think the code audit and the zoning ordinance amendment is probably the best way of handling it instead of doing it in another fashion, but I'm more than willing to listen and take direction in terms of what we think is necessary. But that's the way I would see this maybe continuing, but those were just a couple of comments that I had.
Do you have any pending?
I think we have 2 pending right now.
So that would, if those successfully completed, they're whole thing would put us at 194.
Yes.
I know that for a long time, I was really anxious to get this put through before the code amendments, but now at this time, I mean, things are taking so long and I am not adverse to wrapping it into the whole code amendment since, I mean, I know that a lot of people think it has no effect on long-term rentals, but there's so many experts in the field, including our own consultant, who say otherwise. And that there is some correlation between short-term rentals and the availability of them and the availability of long-term rentals for workforce or middle housing. So I think I think a cap is appropriate. I just don't, whether it happens ahead of time or as part of the code amendment, at this point, things are dragging on so long, I don't think it's going to make much difference. And, you know, it's interesting to me, I mean, it seems that coastal towns up and down the coast have realized that short-term rentals, the proliferation of them in a community really affects the culture and health of a community. And I think that all the things I've read about it or all the different communities I've explored who have done this kind of thing have done it for those reasons, either because for the health of the community or to up the availability of long-term rentals, whichever way you do it and whichever is the part of it that, you know, pushes your buttons the most. I think that it's something that we, you know, the idea of that so many communities have tried doing it or in the process of doing it speaks to me, at least on the North Coast. But if we do it, if we wait until it's part of the whole code amendment thing about increasing the availability of housing, if that ever comes to fruition, that is fine with me now.
Yeah, I think the one thing that's coming, Alyssa Gertler is with Clatsop County and she's their housing specialist. So, you know, some of you've met her and others you'll meet if you participate in some of the housing task force. One of the grants that was requested was Astoria is going to be required to participate in the you keep hearing about the housing productivity that the governor is requiring of certain, and so cities 10,000 or more have to provide that. So as part of that grant through the housing task force, us, Warrenton, Gearhart, and the other community, we submitted it regionally. And so what 3J Consulting did is doing a buildable lands inventory. And so they are in the process of drafting a report that will be provided to you. And I've taken a look at some of the preliminary stuff and you all know this already, but the numbers are going to show you the significance in the second home that's affecting, and not saying, and again, not to make light of STRs by any means, but it is where we're getting hit is the second home, and you'll see that again with updated numbers shortly. So
Empty homes, yeah.
And so again, I'm not trying to make light of the STRs. They no question are part of the issue. But she'll be here and you'll see those numbers and it's kind of eye-opening, you know, somewhat. So, and the recent numbers, you know, they're up to date.
So a holistic approach wouldn't be a bad idea to the whole housing thing, including STRs and I don't know what we can do about second homes. But.
Right. And I think one of the things that was requested by council and the committees was talking about that lease to locals and different things like that. So we're going to have a presentation on that. So that'll be some information in terms of, is it a huge thing? Maybe not that it addresses everything, but maybe it's something that we can review to potentially address some of those housing issues.
Yeah, it's a possibility.
So I wasn't of the understanding that our discussion, maybe I was mistaken, but I wasn't of the understanding that the intention was to push forward the cap ahead of the.
Yeah, it was.
Originally.
It was part of it. Okay.
Before you were on the council, it was. That's how this, you know, how this happened.
Okay.
And just like the tree ordinance and just like the wetlands ordinance, but I'm thinking because the next big thing is going to be housing in general. And it's, so we're going to be, and why not address it as a whole thing?
Well, and to put a cap, because of where STRs are located in our comprehensive plan requires pop-in notices, so we're gonna do. I would assume we would need to
Yeah.
do pop-in all of that stuff,
Yeah.
but then again, do the exact same
Right.
notices and all of the exact same stuff again.
Right, we'd have to do it twice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As opposed
Right.
to
Right.
consolidating this into a single, rather large packet, but a
Right.
single packet.
Because it's staying in land use and not moving into, licensing. So because of that,
Kind of getting
Gary,
to.
yeah, Gary.
To my question. And what has to be a part of the code amendment related to capping STRs? I mean, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. We'd say we're limited to this much, and then how much of it is just the process that we're gonna have to create to manage it?
Right. And I've started to kind of think about that, and I've reached out to a couple of communities. They did, some of them, trying to think which one, I think someone did it almost by a first come, first serve, meaning that as a license canceled, that if you had people that submitted for STRs, that basically you would hold on to them, and as one would not apply, the first come, first serve would be the next one that would then be allowed to move forward in a way.
Is that the code, or is that a process that?
It's right now, Gary, I don't have that answer. I think that would be more policy. But we'd have to talk. I would need some help from the attorneys to make sure, because I don't want to run into an issue where, hey, well, I put in, I need to figure out procedurally how that works, but that was.
Answer my question. What has to be, what do we have to do to change the code and cap STRs? I mean, what does that process look like?
That process is going to be eventually just like wetlands and tree ordinance and things like that. And Eric mentioned a little bit in terms of the notices that are required. It basically will at some point in time be an ordinance that is in draft form that is amending the existing section of the short-term rentals. And that will be brought back to Plan Commission for a hearing. And they will make a recommendation to council to approve or to deny the proposed amendments. And then there will be a hearing to council based on that recommendation. And then you guys would then make the decision to adopt the new ordinance. So it would be a matter of drafting the language in the STRs specifically to what we want amended. So in that would include something to the effect of there will be a maximum of 150 STRs permitted in Cannon Beach. This is how procedurally this will move forward. So there would be some language to help give some guidance in terms of how to administer it.
Okay. Yeah, I just didn't know
And you
if
just
it's one sentence saying.
150, don't.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And that number could be 150, it could be 175, it could be 200. Yes.
I just didn't
careful.
know, are we talking about, a sentence that says, and vacation rentals will be capped to a maximum of
It may be that simple.
100, and the rest of it becomes policy on how that's
Right.
administered? That's kind of what I'm just.
I think it in reality and implementation could be as simple as just an additional G of what exact number it is.
Yeah.
But
We'll have to go through all the notice.
But it would have to do all of that
the
stuff.
whole
yeah.
code rewrite is going to have to.
Right. So where you were going was when we were thinking about putting it into business and licensing and removing it from the zoning ordinance, it would have still require a hearing. It would have bypassed Plan Commission. But we found out that it was still a land use decision, so that didn't matter. So we kept it in 17. So now it'll just go through that amendment process. But as Eric stated, it might be as simple as adding a couple letters in different sections that lay out specifics in terms of the changes we're after.
I don't really believe eliminating short-term rentals gonna have a significant impact on our housing here. I just don't believe that. It may have a minimal impact. But I do support.
You agree it will have an impact. You just don't know to
Yeah,
the
that's
degree.
not even necessarily the reason that I would support of a cap. Is that impact. But, and I know that we've had very consistent numbers for, years essentially. Although at some point it jumped from, the 100 range to the 200 range.
Right now, there's nothing that prevents that from happening.
And I don't want to wait until it's a problem. I think we could cap it at any time, and I'm fine with it being part of the code audit, but I think it should be capped. And I just, I think Eric mentioned this a couple of years ago, that right now, when if you were to buy a home and you asked a realtor whether you could short-term rent the home, the answer is yes. And
Caveats, but yes.
Right.
And I don't want the answer to be yes.
Well, I think
Maybe it will be if we set it at 200 and we've only got 194, but I would like people interested in income property, I would like their option to be long-term rental. That's where I think it may have some effect in the
That's
future.
exactly why Marcy is pushing it so hard. She's
Yeah.
the one, and the whole housing task force has sort of gotten on board with that idea that we don't know how much impact it will have, but it may have some impact and it's worth doing.
I think one of the things that could be done that I've kind of mentioned in the past is there could be some language in there that says, a new home can't be used as an STR for 2 years or something like that. I mean, there could be language that we add that instead of people just building homes and immediately short-term renting them, that we could have some language in there that new construction or something, those are the types of amendments that I think could be impactful, because there are people that are building new homes that immediately come in for STRs. Not all of them, but that is something, and it's a way to address something like that.
They may want to use their home a lot of times, and they may want to just supplement their
Right.
mortgage
So
payment.
Those are the types of, potential amendments and discussions that we'll have.
I don't know, the next time we have this conversation, I would like to see some recommended language and some and process.
One of the things.
And waiting list and administering it.
Okay, one of the things that might be worthwhile then is the next time we speak to her, I would ask that the council maybe also address that when she's here, to kind of indicate that this is something that we feel is important and we'd like to see begin.
Okay.
I think that's a great idea.
And you mean Marcy,
Yes,
which is March 4th
right.
or 11th.
Yeah, so when that happens, that could be, maybe one of the conclusions or, statements that's made at the end by the council is just encouraging that aspect to begin sooner.
I have a question. I know that at least I think that I know that you're only allowed to have one short-term rental per property owner. Is that true?
That's how it's written, right?
What if they have it in an LLC or some other corporate,
How they get around.
because so many of the homes now are owned by LLCs. There's no way to track. It's really difficult to track how many, because I know there's a couple of houses that I know of in the Tolovana area they have several short-term rentals.
I thought you could only have an interest in one.
So that might be other language and other issues that we get additional input from the attorneys on, because if someone has, ABC LLC, CDE LLC, FGH,
How do you connect the dots for one thing?
right.
At least our code.
It's a small enough community to know, but that's how it's done. And so something could maybe be thought of to potentially address it in that fashion.
Yeah, if our code doesn't explicitly say that, it should.
There's language in there. I don't know
No
what.
person shall be issued. In B 1784020 general provisions, B, No person shall be issued a new short-term rental permit who holds another short-term rental permit.
Except if it's an LLC, you don't know.
That's, because it's the word person, I think, is where there's some ambiguity in terms of ownership.
So-
LLC, actually require all owners of the LLC to sign. And it's also checked against the Secretary of State LLC filing, make sure all owners have signed.
It sounds like we need some kind of language about that can't have an interest in or,
Yeah,
We gotta tighten that up is what I'm saying.
yeah, that, there's a little bit of a gap that could be tightened. So those are the types of things, Gary, that, you know, the language, so, and right now, that ordinance is not that long, so it's a fairly easy read, so if you ever have insomnia, you could, read it, but if you need it, it's a fairly easy read, and if you guys wanted to note things or send ideas or things that you want, specifically in there, feel free to send me that information. So when I put that together, that starts to get in there.
Yeah, Seaside's STR is about twice as long as ours.
Yeah.
Earlier today. So there's-
Well, because they have regions or
Yeah,
areas.
yeah,
That-
and they have a lot of other
Right.
additional.
And Earhart's
I guess I don't know.
probably, no,
It didn't really-
none.
Are on this. I think I know Barb and Lisa are interested in doing a cap, but I'd just like the next time we talk about it, and I'm happy to hear what you think, but I'd just like the next time we talk about it, that we'd be
A little more.
moving forward, not saying, yeah, we should cap it, but we're actually moving forward with it. You,
I'm fine
Yep.
with that. I don't have any input. I'm listening. I mean, I
Eric,
have
thoughts on it?
ideas and I'm
I feel like I kind of.
not in disagreement.
Yeah, I feel like I kind of voiced my thoughts. That's it's kind of in the same line as you with. I think like it seems like a shiny egg to chase. Like it's like, oh, STRs, but the total percentage of STRs is less than 15% of the total dwelling units in Cannon Beach. 60% of our dwelling units are second homes that are not permitted as STRs. That seems like the low hanging fruit if we can figure out incentivizing that, the lease to locals, potential, things like that. That seems like the more impactful thing to chase. I don't think a cap 200 or whatever is going to be significantly impactful. I think they may have some impacts. And I don't think it's wrong for chasing it. I don't think we need to rush ahead and push it ahead of our code audit that we're going through. But I think it could have a limited level of impact on that. So that it's not the blanket, like I said, and you quoted me from earlier.
You're not
It's like a
like,
blanket, yes.
I'm opposed to capping STRs.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No, I'm where that number lands, I think is the more important part of the discussion, but I, like I said, I think second homes is more impactful.
Yeah.
Than the STRs in terms of just total sheer volume of homes.
Yeah,
that are in the
that's,
community.
I agree with you, but I also think there's the other issue of livability of the community too.
Yeah,
You know,
and I have issues with the one, my house is literally surrounded. I have every single side of me is an STR.
And we have
And-
also had lots of public comment about.
Yeah, how they affect,
STRs. Yeah,
how they affect
so
people.
I think we're moving in the direction of a cap, but do it through the
Hold on.
code audit.
We just need to force the issue at the right time.
Yeah, March 11th. Okay. Pretty okay with all that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right,
Thanks, Steve.
well, good night.
Okay, so now I'm going to close the work session and open the special meeting, and our only action item is to consider the minutes of the council meetings and retreats in January. Anybody have any revisions?
I had one revision. I caught it today while I was reading through the minutes again. I think it's page 29 of our packet.
What is it? Which meeting?
It is January 7th. Minutes from January 7th. It's page 6 of those minutes. Just a duplication, 2 paragraphs that are worded slightly differently. They're the same thing.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
right before the motion, discussion ORS rule, and then the next paragraph, discussion ORS rule. And they say essentially the same thing. I don't really have a preference.
It wasn't contradictory, so I was gonna let it go.
Yeah, I just clean it up, so.
I would keep the second paragraph.
You like one paragraph better than the other?
Yeah.
I also had Eric as your name instead of Ostrander too.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Get rid of the first one.
We'll
then.
get rid of it. Okay, so we'll do January 7th as amended.
And I have one for January 7th as well.
What page?
Page 8. Paragraph that starts, Kerr read a prepared letter which included personal attacks and the need for accurate information.
Oh, yeah.
I don't believe I read a letter that included personal attacks. It was against personal attacks.
Yeah, that's
So-
good. I did read that.
I guess that's a good one to be clear about. I'll move to approve the minutes of January 7, 9, 10, and 14 as amended.
Second,
Forgot, we do this on
All in favor?
all in favor.
aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Thank you. Someday I'll remember that. Okay, we're at good of the order. Have anything?
I would like to bring up one thing. Talking about the ballot measure May. And maybe Jen has an answer to this, but it's my understanding that the city could withdraw its ballot measure by if it's done soon. My note says March 20 here.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me like our ballot measure just confuses the issue. And I hope that this council will work unanimously to just say vote no on the ballot measure that's going to be a citizen ballot measure.
I will check with Ashley on that one. I don't know the answer to that. I know there is some language on certain things that can be removed. I know that the other one cannot.
Right.
Right, we know that.
Done by petition.
And let you guys know.
All right, I mean, I think it would be something that we'd have to act on reasonably quickly if we wanted to withdraw that ballot measure, but
Well, a phone call
I
was
think-
made to determine.
I think we should and we can have that conversation, but it just doesn't seem like it clarifies anything and it just makes everything more complicated.
There was a phone call made at some point asking if it could be, and we were told it could, but I don't know how, if that, I'd rather you followed up with that.
I'll check in with Ashley and the clerk. just
Okay.
to confirm.
Yeah, it was to the elections people, I
Yeah,
think.
that's Tracy is the clerk there.
Right.
Which is good you brought this up because I was getting ready to file it. So.
Yeah,
Because it had to be filed by March.
well, look,
And so we were prepping everything. So I will talk to Ashley first thing tomorrow and let you guys know.
And if it's possible, can we put it on an agenda prior to that date so we would have that option?
prior to the deadline date.
We could add that to the March 4th meeting, but let me double check and see when that deadline is first.
Yeah.
Because you may need to, if that is something you're interested in, you may need to hold a special meeting.
Okay,
But I will find out all that information and send you guys an email.
Thank you.
Anything else, Gary?
That's it for me. Go on, move on to Lisa.
no, that was it for me too.
And I just have some informational things. I want to remind counselors that Merkley and Bonamici are going to be in Astoria at Community College on Saturday. And if you do want to go to the 1 o'clock session, you do have to RSVP
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh,
to the one that's just the elected officials. And then the other one is open to everyone from 2 to 3.
It was RSVP by today, right?
I can't remember what the date was, but it's still today.
It is technically.
Yeah.
Didn't see that and I'm out of town, so.
Okay.
how do you RSVP to to
There
who?
was an email that came through.
I know, but I don't remember.
Do you
Where it
want to go?
was.
I can RSVP for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
RSVP me.
Okay. Me's coming.
Did you send something out?
Yeah,
It said by 5 o'clock today.
oh, it did say
Okay.
5.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay.
Okay.
Well, then never mind.
Yeah.
Let's see what time zone, no.
You could probably still say, hey, please, can I
Yeah,
go?
probably.
Then, I don't know if everybody's aware, but during the legislative session at noon on Fridays, the League of Oregon Cities does a legislative update, which is really good. And it's, you can watch it live or you can watch the recording, and they're really good recaps. And they keep them on the recordings on the LLC site. So if you want to see
That's right on
up
their
with the
site, okay.
legislature, they're excellent, because there's lots of things going on in the legislature. And then the TLT Balancing Act, that House bill now has a number. It's House Bill 3536. And they give you quite a bit of information on that update on Fridays meetings too. So those are good to.
I think there's also a House bill now on, isn't there on the Rocky Shores? I'm pretty sure an email came through. I haven't even read it yet,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, so there's,
Yeah.
lots of interesting things there. Anybody else have anything? Good of the order?